Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Before we get going, poor work intake equals out of control. Out of control means high stress, you get less done. It's not good. Mastering Work Intake by Jeremy Willits and Tom Cagley is the path to bring order out of chaos. Buy a copy today, J. Ross Publishing or Amazon. The Software Process and Measurement Cast is on vacation for the next few weeks. Until then, we're revisiting some of the fabulous panel discussions we've had during the last 19 years. We'll be back on June 21st. We're looking forward to continuing the conversation. Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 686. Today marks the end of year 15 on the Software Process and Measurement Cast. And we are closing the year with pitchforks and torches, discussing the world of knowledge work in 2022. Leadership, principles, value, and values take center stage. Panels like this make me want to do panels every week. The panelists this week, and sort of part two from last week, are Jeremy Barrio, John Quigley, Kevin Rush, Christopher Herney. In spirit, Susan Parente and Jeremy Willits participate. They were on part one, and their questions and answers sort of bled into this week. Are you ready to grab your pitchforks and torches? It's time for the discussion. All right. Welcome back to the year-end Software Process and Measurement Cast panel discussion. We even have some new faces on this one. Chris Herney's joining us, and many of you have heard Chris on panel discussions before. I have something special in mind early this year, as soon as both of our schedules free up just enough to talk about how people think they can get high value from coaching if they're paying $25 an hour and all the peanuts that you can eat. Yeah, how does that actually really work? What market does that belong in? Gentlemen, and I hope sooner or later that Susan is able to join us. She is having quite the day. I'm going to hold off on a question that she posed at the end of the discussion earlier until perhaps she joins us or we get about halfway through. Today, we talked earlier about all the wonderful things that we saw in 2021 and how those things affected us and how, very frankly, a lot of them were cool. We found ways of making lemonade out of lemons, so to speak. What does 2022 look like? What is the field of vision in terms of agile, getting projects, getting product, all of that? How does that actually happen? And is it going to be different than the world we faced in 2021? Who wants to jump in and start on that? Why are all the cameras going off? Why is everybody dropping? Oh, no.
Going through a tunnel, Tom.
Yeah. Tunnel. Is that what we're looking at, Mr. Quigley?
Oh, boy. I stepped in it. I don't know. I sort of think in some degree, or to some degree, we're going to have to kind of mash Agile a little bit with conventional a little more than we maybe normally would, because if you look at conventional, keeping track of documents and a schedule and things like that, it's more of a thing that's for setting targets when people aren't necessarily co-located and you can have quick lines of communication and things like that. So I can kind of see some structure being added to an Agile approach if your teams are always co-located or not co-located, excuse me, the opposite of co-located.
So, John, you're in a world that is hardware and software defined. So it's perhaps a little different than some of the rest of us.
Yeah.
Why are you seeing the necessity for merging and hybridizing Agile with some of the more conventional or other methods?
Okay. Well, a big chunk of it is going to be because it's automotive. And in the automotive world, if you make a mistake, some people are going to come and it makes to your customer. There are going to be some people going to ask you, show us your due diligence. And in Agile, you kind of don't necessarily rely on that quite so heavily. It's the informal communication, the quick lines of communication and collaboration that produce things, not a lot of rigid, formalized documentation either before the fact or even maybe after. It's not very valued. In most times, it doesn't produce anything that's helpful. So in the automotive industry, you sort of need some of that kind of structure anyway. Track that things, as well as configuration management things. You're coordinating manufacturing along with the design. During the design, you have to tie in the hardware pieces along, and that hardware not only includes the hardware for the product, it includes the hardware for the manufacturing line, any specialized equipment for programming, parameters that are associated with the software and things like that. Which is a lot of things that downstream people need to know and need to be able to work with long before the product is essentially ready to go to maybe production. We don't do that anymore. We don't throw it over the wall. Here's the design. Good luck making that work in the manufacturing world.
So, Kevin and Jeremy, both of you live and work in a relatively controlled, well, it's more of a conventional world. Are you seeing this this hybridization that John's talking about?
For me, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say hybridization. I'd say more, I think John put it before, smashing it in. And partly, I think that's just what the teams I'm working with right now. And that's, they went through a transformation before I came in. And I think
there's that transformation word.
Yeah. And what they did was basically they smashed the team together. Said, "Oh, you're working waterfall. Okay, well next week you're an agile team. Go." Did some initial training of, "Oh, here's how you do Scrum. Here's what agile means. Have fun." And we're running into spots right now where that clash is like, we had a few sprints where it was like everyone was happy, everything was going well, everyone thought it was going well. And then I guess the euphoric view of everything going well faded off and everyone reverted back. And we had a very couple of bad sprints. So we had to kind of revamp, retool. And part of it was they were over managing the entire flow of the process, everything going through. Like there were so many spreadsheets that are floating around of like what everyone's capacity was and test cases and stuff like that. My mind exploded a few times. So I think, yeah, you can have a good mix, but it's trying to find that midpoint where you're not overdoing it. And to John's point, where you're just not kind of throwing over the wall saying, oh, we're done. See ya. And we turn around and walk away on to the next one.
Kevin?
Yeah. So I don't know I can answer this question well, because I think the only thing certain about the future is the uncertainty that we're dealing with. Because I think of like, there's a collision of like, I think we were talking about before we got onto the recording, right? There's this collision of kind of old ways of doing things versus new ways of doing things, and kind of letting value lead or trying to drive down intent to the team so they can execute in small batches. And we're just bad at it. Like, I mean, like we're people, we want to have that big thing where we understand everything up front. So I do think there has to be quick visualization, and that's why I've seen this working. Quick visualization of intent or strategy from high level. And what happens is, or the struggle I've been seeing is the leadership kind of raised to that level, got to that level because they could get things done. They can get output done. But they're not that great actually at defining like kind of intents or outcomes. and trying to drive that down to the team and being okay with them making those experiments and learning in real time. So anyhow, I just see a challenge there, but really the right level of visualization, I haven't figured it out. Like, so when I say this, but there's some kind of right level of visualization between the end-to-end coordination and then empowering teams to execute at a team level, at least in the software development world, that I've seen glimpses of success, but I've also seen lots of failure as well.
So you use the term visualization of intent. I guess that's a phrase, not a word. Can you throw a few more words around what you mean by that and what that actually, I guess, looks like?
Yeah, man, I wish I had like an example. I was just thinking of one of these examples. We had a consultant in, that actually a valuable one, a helpful one, not just all the ones that are out there. Ones that was like, oh, they're actually good at this part, I guess I should say. I shouldn't say that in a podcast full of consultants, huh? So I apologize. I'm not talking about you guys.
We are all exceptions. That's right. Of course not us. We are all the exception to the rule.
But what I loved about this was like he was pushing the product leadership to think beyond. We just need them to upgrade, and he's like, well, why? Why do we need them to upgrade? Like, what are we really trying to do? And kept pushing them down more and more into the intent of behind that, which then created an opportunity for the teams to have more bite-sized chunks at that, or at least understanding the problems that they're solving. Because upgrading for just upgrading's sake, like why? You know what I mean? That's not a very good understanding of the intent. And a lot of, maybe, is it overhead? Is it like now we have 12 versions to support, and the overhead of that is just killing us? So if that's the intent, I can think of, without much thought, there's 3 or 4 different ways that we might want to attack that at a team level, right? Do we want to have a product that's continuously upgradable? You know what I mean? Like what kind of environment are we doing that in? Are we doing it in SaaS, or like what is the mechanism that's going to keep us to solve the real question behind? We just need to upgrade. We need to get more people on this upgrade vent. So that's kind of an idea, like what is that, and then pushing that down so then the teams can experiment, and having the teams drive up visualizations of the experiments that they're investing in, and then tracking that in real time in whatever tool you might be using.
So Chris, ground us. I mean, you are, when I need to reset how I'm thinking, I track down stuff that you've written or tweets that you've made and think about that, because it generally brings me back to what I think we should be thinking about. If we're doing all this hybridization, at what point does this stop being agile?
I tend to believe that any environment or any endeavor could have characteristics of agility to some extent. And, some efforts have more agility, some have less. It's funny, Tom, because when I think about this topic, I always go back to your traditional sign off, right? If process improvement is a never ending journey, why do so many people ask when will we arrive, right? Well, probably won't, right? Ever. It's a never ending journey. The thing I think about right now with the environment we're in right now, and to John's point about, maybe needing to accommodate more conventional, traditional approaches than, hamper the ability to deliver value, are caused by too much asynchronous work and lack of collaboration. I think synchronous work and collaboration resolves a lot of the types of waste from lean and things like that. And I think the environment we're in right now, where we're just distributed, the amount of asynchronous work, handoffs, stage gates, it's just naturally going to increase because we don't have that kind of ready access to one another that we would have if we were co-located. I mean, things are getting better. Technology is improving. Zoom, collaboration tools like Miro and Mural and Microsoft Teams and all these things. But at the end of the day, we're still going to have to, I guess, tolerate a lot more asynchronous work than we would otherwise like. One of the things that is an outcome of a lot of asynchronous work is a lot of write up a document all by yourself in a silo and stash it in SharePoint and hope the next guy down the line reads it So I'm struggling right now as an agilist, trying to sort of reconcile this idea. I keep seeing things on Twitter where other agilists and agile coaches are saying, let people work wherever they want to work and don't be so tyrannical about making people come back to the office. Let them work when they want to work, where they want to work. But at the same time, we promote these ideas about collaboration and synchronous work. So, it's kind of a mixed message. So I'm really struggling with this idea kind of internally, right? I'm having this dilemma. And when I see people promote that, that idea, let people work wherever and whenever they want, I often wonder where their thoughts are. Are they thinking that they're promoting more autonomy and psychological safety at the expense of, synchronous and collaborative work? I don't know. I'm kind of just sitting by here watching and observing things and seeing how things play out.
It seems to me like it's less of a psychological safety thing and more of some strange way to address a work-life balance. I mean, you could be psychologically impacted by people on a Teams meeting. I see a lot of tweets from people that are apparently on not the kind of Teams meetings that I would like to be on for sure, that are unproductive and seem to be draining them quite badly. And enough to get some pretty harsh treatment, harsh words blurted over Twitter. So I'm kind of wondering, like you, I don't know what it is, but I'm wondering if it's more to help with some kind of, as a social thing, to be more or in line with work-life balance sort of objectives. The whole, in my view, the whole thing, it's the same problem. It's just a different situation. And the problem is this. We want to here is how we're going to do the work. It doesn't really matter what the work is. It doesn't matter if it's a gaming software that goes on a server somewhere that requires no login from you other than your fictitious name and an email address. And we want to treat that exactly like we would treat forward-looking radar for a car or adaptive cruise control or self-driving vehicles. The thing is, it always depends. And so the idea of staying at home and keeping everybody at home is just as bad as the idea of keeping everybody in a building. I think it's you have to kind of pick what am I doing? What are the constraints? What optimizes this?
It's interesting too, because the thing that I'm noticing, at least in myself, and I know that that's just anecdotal, but my work-life balance is way out of whack. I had a much better work-life balance when I had to get up be somewhere at 9 a.m. and leave somewhere at 5 p.m. And I knew what the rest of my evening would look like, So it's strange times for sure.
I'm not sure that I already had a pretty bad work-life balance throughout my career. and at the start of it was balanced one way, and then along the way it just got ridiculously the other way. And working from home really kind of helps a little, but the reality is I start often before 6, or at least occasionally before 6. I certainly start before 8 all the time, and I go until 9 or 10 o'clock at night on some nights. So,
the thing that I think is really interesting is I think at a superficial level, I think it's a really cool idea that organizations are no longer restricted by geography when it comes to bringing on talent, right? At the same time, how are we to promote, again, more collaboration and synchronous work when one guy on the team is in California, the other guy's in India, the other Europe? It's
or even worse, they're all in Greensboro, North Carolina. So at least they're in the same time zone, but they're not at the same place to flip things over and look at things together and solve problems from, have this impromptu conversations about potential issues or potential opportunities.
So do we solve this problem in 2022? Do we find a way of actually being distributed and being synchronous? By the way, if anyone can really tell me that the Teams whiteboard is actually a functional whiteboard, I'd love to get a lesson. But pushing that aside for a second, can we solve not necessarily us, all of us, because we at least have to have one more person to be able to solve this ourselves. But can we solve this problem in 2022 where we can be distributed as the context allows and still do collaborative synchronous work, even though we're working asynchronously?
And for me, sorry, Chris, if you want to go ahead. So like for me, when I think about, when you ask that question, I just feel like the jury's still out as far as like, has leadership decided what strategy they want? Like I've worked with 2 organizations that have been, I think they're confused on their strategy as far as what they're trying to do collaboratively. Meaning, I almost feel like you have to think we are going into a season, whether, in general, we're investing in this and we're going to be 100% remote. Just think that way. Like, even if we do allow people to come in, or we're going to, whatever, that we set our company up that way and we're looking that way. So you think about the collaborative through time zones. You actually address all those things when you're building the teams, when you're, creating agile teams, when you're creating collaborations between teams, right? Any of those things like are going to be real hindrance. But I just find there's this flirting with, we'll just be hybrid and it's just a hand wave. And I'm going like, that's probably the worst thing to do. I think it's the work-life balance. It's that we realize that our software developers will leave us if they don't feel like they have the flexibility in their life, and they have opportunity right now, kind of the resignation stuff, great resignation, that everybody's talking about. And I think that's what a lot of this is. But I think until we pick one strategy, I think either is going to be better than the in-between. Personally.
So do you think hybrid is one of the great cop-outs of 2021? Let's be hybrid?
Without thinking through the team formations or the value streams of those teams, yes, like 100%. In my personal experience, I guess.
Jeremy, how do we fix this?
It's
on you, man.
Well, it only took probably close to 20 years for everyone to realize that, hey, working from home is not that bad. It's not the big bad thing that everyone, like senior leaders, initially thought. I don't know if we could fix this in the next year. I think it's going to be trial and error for the next probably couple. And if once this pandemic's kind of come and gone, then I'm thinking you're just going to see the rush of, okay, everyone, you had fun at home, cool, come into the office now. I don't know if I'd be interested to see, like, for me, anyone that I work with, I'd be pushing, saying, okay, we could still work this. We've got to have the right guidelines to make sure we're getting what we need. We're seeing the value that we need to push things across.
What would be helpful if an organization had some set of principles that they would use for the people to make some decisions about whether this should be a co-located discussion or some excursion into some co-location for a brief period of time before we go back to being scattered to the winds. If there's some kind of philosophical rules or consistent ideas for when to apply which of these things. Like for my boss asked me if I wanted to come back to the office, and I said, or how I wanted to handle it. I said, I'd just assume most of the time I can spend away. But there are exceptions, and I can identify what those are specifically, that I want to be with the team. And those, I'm a project person, so those are developing the project overview of this project schedule and including some of the details for each one of those phases. If we look at how the project's conducted, and design reviews, I believe those are going to be best served if we're in concept reviews and things like that. Documentation reviews can probably go either way, but there's some things that I think you do need to be in close contact with the team to be able to do this. Problem solving is another good one, rather than just try to do this over.
Is coming up with those principles and guidelines an experiment that you think ought to be done by at least some portion of the organizational workforce in 2022?
Yeah, and that would be that's a good one, Tom. I wish I'd have thought of that.
I think you did.
Seriously, I didn't think about that. I'm just blurting what I think how I work, and it's just how I choose to work. I don't know if anybody else has thought about this in this way. And Tom put the nail on the head. The organization should be doing that, not just if at least the individual teams, and it's maybe in some degree the hierarchy of the organization, leadership of the organization, if only to put, we got to make sure these things do not violate the principles that we want our organization to stand up for, right, or to have in place to facilitate the corporate culture in some way.
So before I put the question that Susan put on the table right at the end of our session earlier today, because I think that's sort of a downer way to end the conversation, but so we'll do that last so that we can then all walk away and think about that. Before we do that, John, that's an experiment. Chris, what is one experiment that we should be doing in 2022 to get better at asynchronous or get better at distributed synchronous and collaboration work?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a concrete idea of an experiment to be run, but here's something I would say. And maybe this is controversial. I don't know. Home distributed. I think I heard a comment earlier that it took 20 years to see that remote work wasn't the big bad thing. I don't know that we've necessarily proven that working from home or working remotely is a good thing. If you think about, at least in the domain that most of us are used to, like typically software development and things like that, I would love to see some real kind of case studies or have some conversations with people like that to see how they maintain their high standards of technical excellence and delivering value frequently during this whole distributed thing. I think a lot of organizations, especially really large traditional enterprises, have proven that remote work can at least maintain the status quo. But I don't know if we've proven that remote work really has made anything much better.
Good point.
Maybe that's controversial. I don't know. Maybe there's some people who have examples where their company's effectiveness when it comes to delivering value to their customers has just gone through the roof when everybody went home and started working from home. I don't know. Maybe there are examples of that out there.
Maybe there are here too. I mean, that let's get them on the table. Okay, one more experiment for 2022.
So, I mean, I'm with Chris, and I think that should be the experiment for 2022. And we could even marry it to what I was discussing about. Leadership needs to define, what kind of strategy they're going to take. So even if it's the experiment is, hey, we're going to have some of these teams are really going to be 100% distributed. We're going to, let them self-organize around those things, as much as possible. And you have another group where you're like, hey, we're co-located, period, and see how those things go. That if I could try something, I think I would do that, and even have them do different products, for lack of a better term, teams of teams. If you're doing that, I think that would be a great experiment to prove out some of the stuff Chris is saying. I do find it strange that we don't have home run white papers. Partly it's because we're surviving, right, these last 2 years. But to Chris's point, I haven't heard anybody besides like, wow, we've mobilized the medical community to do some things, right? Those only, or software companies to support medical communities, or the rollout of stuff. Those are the only success stories I've really, really heard personally in the software community. I would love to hear more.
Yeah, I think we do need to hear those success stories, or be willing to hear that there are no true success stories other than a few, right? And that
I got a big anecdotal one. I think AWS was down twice this month, which is like very rare that it happens at all for a small blip. That's just anecdotal. But just throwing that out.
Well, that's just unpleasant. Speaking of that, right at the end of our conversation this morning, Susan put on the table something that she's been hearing in her market, and that is, okay, work from home. That's great. We're going to pay you less. Now, I'll be honest with you. I'm probably like Mr. Quigley. Now that I no longer travel, my other stuff seems to have gone away, and I now spend way more time actually working. But I think there's probably a bunch of people that are one way, bunch of people the other way. Probably a lot of people haven't changed at all in terms of total amount of time spent working. But would you be willing to trade some of your pay to stay home? And if she's hearing that, wouldn't surprise me if we're all not hearing that and not be willing to talk about it. So what do we think? You stay home, you get less, you travel, and you go to work, you get to be paid more.
I would not just reject it out of hand, though I don't want to go back to that for a number of reasons. One being, if you go to a workplace, it's 8 hours over the target, no matter what, and those 8 hours are those 8 hours, right? No meetings, no team discussions. You still are there doing whatever you need to do, pushing some papers or something, and that would cut into my my nap time and my bass playing time in the middle of the day, which I sometimes take. And I'm not really fond of that idea after 30 years of having none of those things, essentially working through all that and working late even. Now I find that, I still work late, but I squeeze in some bass playing time. I even bought me a new one for Christmas. Kind of cool. So I'm thinking no, but I would do some math. I'd say, okay, what do I save in gas by not driving? Where my savings are? And I might be willing to noodle around that a little bit in terms of a reduction. But in theory, I think they're paying me for what my skill set, the n number of years, which I don't want to really confess to a second time, of doing this kind of work, and those experiences. I don't see what time over target means in terms of or time in an office means in terms of the connection to my salary. If I give you a patent that gives you $500,000 worth of sales or more, a couple of $1 million, do I get more? No, I don't think so. So I think, I entertain it, but I'm not going to be happy about it if I can't make it work to my mathematical, what I think is mathematically appropriate.
John, are you more of an introvert or an extrovert? I'm just curious.
I'm right on the line. I think the last time I took the test, I was just barely extrovert, and that's through years of work. I'm mostly my nature from day one has probably been much more introvert. I'm better. I'm a decent engineer because things are really cool, But I've managed to work on it enough where if you look at his Myers-Briggs test, I think it was Myers-Briggs, I just barely crossed the line. Below here is introvert, and above here is extrovert. I'm just barely across there.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that is because you kind of brought up an interesting thing tied to value, and I hate to confess this on a podcast because I might get paid less starting next year. But I'm a facilitator, and I'm a people person. So I am more valuable in an office. I'm confident that I facilitate better in an office. Really good at reading rooms. Really good at picking up on the nuances and keeping people involved, hearing the outlier idea. And I'm good at it online, but I'm not as good. I'm not as effective. No. I can be honest with that. And so when I'm only bringing that up, I am an extrovert, and I am bring a little bit more value, I think, in a physical space.
Yeah, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. I think I would, on the face of that, I would agree with that. I think you're right. And
so when somebody says, hey, I want to pay you less because of that, I can kind of understand. But to me, back to my capitalist roots, I would still say I am what I'm worth and I can go somewhere else.
Yeah, okay. If I have to accept it, right. If you have to accept it because you have to accept it in the short term, that doesn't mean the company has got their way. I can't believe how many times in my career that I have seen companies make decisions unilaterally and the people accept it, because I got nothing to do for the next couple of weeks. I have to accept this, and I am. And I'm going to just give one parting shot across the bow. I don't like this, And then 6 months later, you see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 people leave.
Yeah. The interesting study that's kind of coming out is I heard that majority of like the resignation is kind of mid-career and mid-established people. So meaning like they haven't been there. It's not the people that just got to a job that leave right away. And it's not the people that have been there for a long time. The majority of them is like that 3 to 5, 3 to 8 years, because they're just like, hey, I can take some risks. I got some experience and feel like I can make that jump. I'm only saying that because I think it does kind of go back to the conversation we're having about value, right? Like, am I valuable in the market? So if someone pushes you on that, I would probably be looking other places. And I'd probably be blunt with them too. Like, yeah, you can pay me less. I'm not, but I'm going to see what I'm worth in the market then.
Jeremy?
Yeah, because the whole idea is being passed around up here. I think it's being passed around everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
To John's point, like I would do the math in my head. Okay, does it make sense? And to Kevin's point, like I'm the same way, Kevin. I'd rather be in the office and talk to people and go around and draw nice little pictures on an actual whiteboard, not try to draw with my mouse on Mural or the Teams whiteboard. But it's like, even like my wife, for instance, she just left her current position. She has a new position starting in a couple of weeks. She's actually taking less money and she's going into the office. So it's like, those people that are leaving, are they leaving because of money or are they leaving because of bad management? I know that's a whole other discussion.
Right.
But I think, like, from a monetary perspective, I don't even think it's really going to come to fruition from the most part, because now you have, to that point, you have people sitting there like, well, I can find something somewhere else. And you got people that are going to pay for it. So they may try that experiment for a few months and realize, like, yeah, this isn't going to work. We gotta go back to the way it was. We're gonna change it. Like, even now they're talking about, like, oh, well, we'll give people an extra $500 for their internet service that they're going to use. I kind of laugh at that. I'm like, well, they're paying for it anyway, and they're not paying for gas. So you're going to give them extra money. Do it.
Yeah. I would suggest you can never go back. Mr. Herney, your thoughts?
Well, that's I'll take a hardline stance. That's an emphatic no for me. No way.
Good. I'm glad somebody was, because I'm piling up my pitchforks and my torches over here. This is a go to the mattress thing, because you never go back.
100%, Tom. From a compensation standpoint, from a monetary compensation standpoint, I'm worth what I'm worth, and you can either choose to pay me that or not. The other thing is, I feel like this idea must come from like some bean counters in trying to, find ways to save the company money. Look, there are infinite possibilities in the pandemic world, in the mostly distributed workforce, for companies to save money. We're going to find companies needing less infrastructure, not needing office buildings anymore. They're going to be able to end leases, get out of leases, not have pay for all that, phone systems and server rooms and all these things. If you want me to sacrifice something in terms of compensation for the privilege to work at home, okay, I don't need the on-site barista anymore. I don't need the Xbox. I don't need, scooters to zoom around the office. You can save all your money on that stuff. I don't need it anymore, right? Yeah. There's other things, like if I were a full-time employee working at home all the time, does my employer need to carry workers' comp insurance for me anymore? No, probably not. There's lots of ways that organizations are gonna cut costs.
No, they already are in some ways.
Yeah. And so if you want to say to me that somehow the value I bring to you is worth less monetary compensation, I'm leaving. We want the conversation before I walk out.
I'm sold, Chris. I changed my answer to I'll do the math in my head. You're right. I forget all these other perks they get by us not being there. No, you're right. That's flat out no.
Yeah, it's and that may be the cynic in me that like I said, these bean counters looking for ways to sort of skimp on expenditures.
Also, and I just go like, if this is where we're at, this is going to go really bad. Meaning like, because I mean, I would assume this panel would say that people are our most important asset. Especially good people who can solve problems, can learn, adapt, and solve problems. And so if we're like starting there to save some money, like a few bucks, it's probably not going to go well. It shows our culture problem.
I'll play the age card, and that I've been there. That is exactly where we got to in the late 80s, where we went through and just chainsawed people, threw people away, went overseas, all sorts of things. All of them were interesting, but the reality was it had nothing. It ended up having no lasting good impact on the bottom line, and it had no lasting good impact on software quality. I mean, we did build a lot of really cool centers and helped jumpstart huge, great industries elsewhere in the world, but I don't think at a micro team level or an organizational level that it ended up saving them a boatload of money at all.
You got to think about the morale impact too. I've worked at two companies where there were things in place. Let's see if I can say this without actually committing to anything. There were big companies that said, if you do this, we will do that, right? Or this is part of your compensation package. This sort of if you do this, we'll do that, right? And you do this, and you get this underway to where it's some way through the process. And they say, we're not going to do that anymore. We're doing this instead in terms of your compensation. And even if you accept these things are going to have an impact on your morale. I mean, I saw the head of HR for a multinational conglomerate was having to defend the actions they took in making one of these changes. I'll say what it was. It was patent remuneration, right? If you give us a patent, here's what the company will pay you in intellectual property worth value for you. You sign a patent over to us, and we will give you N number of dollars after it's gone through the attorney and it's actually given a patent number. And as the thing is coming back from the patent of office, they say, we changed our compensation package. And wouldn't you know it, it's not to the better. It's like 10 to 20% of what the original agreement was at signing of the patent. Now, I don't know anybody who left immediately. They created a big stink. The HR person had to get in there and defend this issue, and they said they thought they saw their failing as being we didn't communicate this well enough. And I'm thinking, you taking $5,000 to $8,000 out of my pocket is nothing to do with communication error. It's got something more to do with the commitment you made. And I know for a fact, personally, it dulled my edge. I thought that company altogether different than I had prior to that. And I'm not going to say my work ethic eroded, but extra hours were not going to be so easy to come by. And so we damage our people when we make these goofy changes, even if they are forced or compelled otherwise to accept a reducing salary, and we justify it. Our organizations justify it through some feeble attempts at justification.
So let's take this home on a positive note, since we're closing in on an hour. 2022. Do you have a positive feeling that we will get better at becoming more synchronous, even though we're distributed, and that we will get past some of this falderall of, just because you're not around doesn't mean that you're not valuable to the organization?
Well, I don't know. I'm a bit pessimistic because, and this has synergy with talking about, throughout the whole podcast, right, is I think most companies are in this state of mind of keeping the ship afloat until we can pull everybody back into the office, and maybe sort of behaving like an ostrich and burying their head in the sand to hide from the reality that we might not go back to the office. So for 2022, I kind of foresee more keeping the ship afloat. I think that if I understood Kevin correctly, I think the message he's really been trying to push is commit to something, right? We've been keeping the ship afloat for far too long. We need to commit to something. And I don't see organizations really committing to something. I would love for some organizations to say, for now, let's run with the idea that we're just going to be fully remote, and let's look for the good things that have happened in our remote world and find ways to amplify those successes and get better in 2022. And I don't see a lot of organizations with that attitude.
It'll be the level to which our leadership leads. That's exactly what I'm trying to say, Chris. I think I'm optimistic to the degree that we try to drive autonomy by giving clarity. It's pretty much that. Like if you're really trying to do that, I'm optimistic. If not, I think we are just, I don't know what we're doing. It's burying your head. We slowly, us humans, we have intuitions. Like we don't always know what they are. We don't communicate them quickly, but we can feel it. And I think we'll feel it again if it's a third year in a row, kind of kicking the can again.
Yeah.
Another variant. Mr. Quigley.
Yeah, I think at bare minimum, organizations need to come up with some kind of, if we're not going to pick one or the other, they need to come up with these principles for when to select to do this or that, and maybe some justification for why they make these claims or want this to happen. And it could be as an experiment, like we talked about here. If it was me and I was heading a company, I would figure out where look at the number of teams I have and figure out ways to put them in different situations for in work or synchronous and asynchronous work, and a way to devise, figure out how to measure that as an outcome, figure out which one of those are best for whatever circumstance to help me guide my principles.
And John, as Agilists, we know how well companies follow principles.
Yeah, the thing is, whether they follow them or not, I kind of feel compelled to follow mine, and I feel really goofy when I have to violate them, and that makes me want to do something like, I can't be here. Runs contrary to what I believe and my principles, and either my principles have to change, and at this point in my life, my principles are probably pretty solid and they're probably justified. I'm not going to want to do that. Mr.
Barrio, optimist, pessimist?
I'm being optimistic. I think we will. I think we will get better all around. But to the point when we talk about the leadership has to provide the principles, and that for me, for every team I've worked with, in a corporate setting, corporate world, regular FTE employee to a consultant now, it's even as an executive, I took more of the team's direction on what they wanted to do. I pushed it back on them. It's like, hey, how is this going to make you guys work better? I didn't come up. I had my general guidelines, but basically told them, hey, this is what I think. What do you guys think? And you guys can do whatever you want with it, but as long as we can push our value through, get what we need to get done through, then let's make it work. And let's get the right tools in place. So I think 2020 and 2021 was the oh crap moment, as I like to tell my students when I teach jiu-jitsu, was that one kind of second where you don't know what's going on and you have to figure out real quick. Now I think we're going to be at a point where we know roughly what we want to do and how we want to do it. But if we don't get those principles in place, then it means nothing. Everyone's going to fall flat on their face.
I think it's going to be a mixture, unfortunately. It's going to be it depends, and it's going to end up depending on whether or not the organization that you're dealing with has leadership. And I think you're right, Kevin. It boils down to leadership because someone has to have a vision and someone has to be willing to put that political acumen and political power on the line to actually make that, to state that vision and then defend it. So, and again, I think we're all right in terms of we have to find a way of taking whatever hand we're dealt and be able to make the work as synchronous and as collaboration rich as it needs to be. And I guess, that's the nut we have to solve across this year. So, gentlemen.
Hey, Tom.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I was just going to say one thing that just in the response to this, your last question, made me think like it could also be, or it is also very contextual. When we say better, like what does better actually mean? Does better mean we've become more effective at delivering value to our customer than we were the day before or the month before or the year before? Or does it mean we've just become more accepting and tolerant of the status quo? That could, to some people, that might be a definition of, I don't know.
Oh yeah, less blood pressure transients is always that's what I call, when you get torqued up and you get that moment when you feel like you're going to have to hurt something.
Well, you see, we could get Jeremy to teach us jujitsu, and then we would be able to hurt things. That, as I said, that's one of the reasons I pay a lot of attention to what Chris says. That is the question. And I think we'll have to come back and answer that question. What is better? Because both of those, depending on your point of view, you're right, might be better. I know which one I'd vote for, but we'll figure that out at some point.
We'll see you next December, right?
Probably
we'll find out next December.
Well, probably before then, because I have piled up all my pitchforks and torches. So maybe
I'll be over to pick one up.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent, gentlemen. How can people continue the conversation? How can they find you and have a marvelous conversation on any of these topics? Chris, why don't you go first?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, Christopher Herney, Hurney. And probably I'm more active on Twitter. It's Chris_Herney, Hurney. The challenge there will be you're going to have to sift through a lot of hockey tweets to find the software development and agile stuff.
They're not related?
They could be.
Kevin.
Yeah, definitely on LinkedIn. I'm the busiest there. It's the easiest place to pick me up. And my handle on Twitter, KezRush, KEZRUSH. Email, KezRush@gmail.com. So any of those are great. No hockey, though. More of a keeping up with my kids. They don't play hockey. They're all girls. I'd love if they played hockey, but they're more into dresses and dancing and boys right now.
Let's hear from the Canadian about hockey.
There we go.
Yeah, well, I have a Twitter feed at jbarrio. It's been a while since I've been on it. I haven't done much. And funny enough, favorite hockey team I like is the Philadelphia Flyers. So, which makes no sense as I live near Toronto. But yeah, you can get a hold of me through LinkedIn, Jeremy Barrio. I believe I'm the only one on LinkedIn with that name. Or you can email jbarrio@barrioandassociates.com.
Mr. Quigley, sir.
I'm on LinkedIn, John M. Quigley on LinkedIn, because there actually are a few Johns and Quigleys out there. Oddly enough, they spell the name Jon too, one or two of them. And I'm also on, you can reach me at john.quigley@valuetransform.com.
Excellent. Gentlemen, this was marvelous. I was actually glad that I was able to run down the street and borrow a new mixer so that this actually worked out better than the first one. So again, thank you again, and I look forward to finding out whether or not we get some of these experiments in place and whether or not we get to discuss the next wave of what the world will look like in 2022 and a half and 2023. Talk to you next week.